Welcome to a world beyond your wildest nightmares. A world where the lines between reality and horror blur, and the darkness never sleeps. Are you ready to face your fears? To step into the shadows and confront the unknown? Beware, for what you are about to witness may chill you to the bone. From the twisted minds of the most demented storytellers comes a new tale of terror, beyond anything you've ever experienced.
Katie was looking for a new apartment and found a listing on Craigslist that seemed perfect. The apartment was located in a trendy neighborhood, and the rent was surprisingly low. When she arrived at the apartment for a viewing, she was greeted by a strange man who introduced himself as the landlord. He showed her around the apartment, which was spacious and well furnished, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The landlord seemed a bit too eager to rent out the apartment and didn't seem interested in asking her personal questions. Katie decided to take the apartment anyway, as the location and the price were too good to pass up. At first, everything seemed fine. But then, strange things started to happen. Katie heard strange noises coming from the walls, and sometimes she would come home to find things had been moved around. One night, Katie woke up to find a strange figure standing at the foot of her bed. It was a tall, thin man with long, spindly fingers and a face that was obscured by shadows. Katie screamed and tried to run, but the figure disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Katie realized that something was seriously wrong with the apartment and decided to move out. When she tried to call the landlord to give him notice, she discovered that the number she had been given was no longer in service. Katie never found out who the landlord really was or what had been happening in the apartment. But to this day, she still has nightmares about the figure at the foot of her bed, wondering if it might reappear in her life again. John was looking for a new roommate, and he turned to Craigslist to find one. He found a listing from a man named Mark who seemed like a good fit. They exchanged a few messages and agreed to meet in person to discuss the details. When John arrived at Mark's apartment, he was greeted warmly and shown around the place. Mark seemed friendly and trustworthy, so John decided to move in. At first, everything seemed to be going well. They split the rent and got along pretty well. But then, John started to notice some strange things about Mark. He was always quiet and withdrawn, and he seemed to have an obsession with knives. One day, John came home early and found Mark standing in the kitchen with a knife in his hand. Mark was muttering to himself and seemed to be in some kind of trance. John tried to talk to him, but Mark didn't respond. Suddenly, Mark lunged at John with a knife. John managed to dodge the attack, but he was cut badly. He realized that he needed to get out of there before things got any worse. He ran out of the apartment and called the police. When they arrived, they found Mark had killed himself by cutting his own throat. They searched the apartment and found a room full of disturbing items, including photographs of John and other people he knew. John was left traumatized and terrified by the experience. He realized that he had narrowly escaped a dangerous situation and that he never really knew the person he had been living with. He vowed never to use Craigslist to find a roommate or anything else again, and he lived in fear of what might have happened if he had stayed just a little bit longer. Becca was browsing Craigslist for a used car. She came across a listing for a car that seemed too good to be true, but she decided to contact the seller anyway. The seller responded quickly, and they agreed to meet at a local parking lot to check out the car. When Becca arrived, the seller was already there, waiting for her. The seller seemed friendly enough, but Becca couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The car looked good, but she noticed that there were no license plates on it, which made her uneasy. Despite her reservations, Becca decided to take the car for a test drive. As she was driving, the seller started to ask her personal questions, like where she lived and what she did for a living. Becca started to feel like she was being interrogated. Suddenly, the seller pulled out a knife and held it to Becca's throat, demanding that she hand over all of her money and valuables. Becca was terrified, but she managed to grab the knife and use it to defend herself. She stumbled out of the car and ran as fast as she could. When she got home, she called the police and reported the incident. They were able to track down the seller, who turned out to be a notorious criminal who had been using Craigslist to lure people into his scams. Becca was lucky to have escaped with her life, but the experience left her shaken and traumatized. She learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of trusting strangers, especially when dealing with online transactions.
Thanks for watching this video, but be warned, The horrors you've just witnessed may follow you into your dreams. As you close this window, remember that the darkness is always lurking just beyond the light. And who knows what terrors await you when you turn off your device and venture into the unknown. So keep your wits about you and your doors locked tight. You never know what kind of horrors may be lurking just outside. Good night, and sweet nightmares.